back when I left religion and fundamentalist Christianity, I noticed how the Southern Baptist Convention had taught since the 1980s that AIDS is a gay disease. And why does this matter? Because when you label something as not heterosexual or not white, you create an environment that's easy to dehumanize people. Back in the 1980s, when Reagan was president, from 1980 to 1988 approximately, millions upon millions of very young and middle-aged people, men especially, who didn't identify as cis or heterosexual, accidentally contracted what they hadn't had a clue what it was until many years later, was a virus that killed people. I mean, now it's not a death sentence, but it's still very taboo. What's really, really sad about the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s is that the Southern Baptist Convention, mainly Baptists, people in leadership, nicknamed AIDS as the gay disease. I grew up in the denomination that dehumanized gay people for being who they are and contracting an illness that no one had ever seen or heard of before that decade. And why did the Southern Baptists do that? Because they were very intertwined with Republican and political pull. They didn't see gay people as human beings who were valuable, and losing them would have been a tragedy. No, they viewed gay people as unfortunate deviants and predators. And in their opinion, anyone who got a disease that wiped out predators was a gift blessing from God, which is awful. And a lot of people still refer to AIDS as the gay disease. And why is this so awful? Because when you don't see people as human beings whose lives matter, it's much easier to dehumanize them or to see them as less than. I mean, I've lived in areas, especially in Florida, that still talks about the gay disease, AIDS. I don't even like calling it that, but we need to talk about it. Religion has always disliked things that was a threat to their hierarchy, their straight privilege, their male-dominated authority positions. And gay people are a threat to biblical toxic masculinity. Not all masculinity is toxic, but the kind of religion that was taught to me as a young girl in Baptist circles was extremely toxic. Imagine growing up in the biggest Protestant denomination, and they call young people who have, at that time, an incurable virus that cannot be contained. At least now we can contain it, and people who suffer daily with this virus have mostly long-term existences, just like people who don't have it. And what's tragic, labeling people as having the gay disease, you stop seeing it as a bad disease and you see it as a good thing. Imagine if people called a disease the pedophile disease. Would we honestly see that disease as a bad thing? I would, because even pedophiles, they're still human beings. They may not do things that most human beings would call human, but I wouldn't wish death or anything on anybody. When you call somebody the same kind of words you call an actual predator who hurts kids and vulnerable women, you're dehumanizing them. It's like calling indigenous minorities savages, because then you can dehumanize them. Calling anything that kills, destroys, and hurts people's lives and experiences as gay is a slur. And it's exactly the opposite of how Christians are told to behave in the Bible. No Christian should ever mourn the death of someone with AIDS. They should not even internally think, well, they got what they deserve. Nobody who claims to know any deity should ever think such a thing. My own family thinks that it's good for gay people to die with this kind of disease. And they have the audacity to say that they're going to heaven having thoughts like that? Nobody, regardless of how your gender, your orientation, and your sexual preferences go, nobody deserves AIDS. Nobody deserves to be hurt by other people or things you can't see. And it's not a surprise that the same generation that dubbed AIDS the gay disease also has the highest CSA and SA against children. Because when you don't even talk about people who have consensual sex with the same sex that they prefer, and you refer to these consensual, kind people as having the gay disease or actually wishing that they would get it, it's awful. I cannot believe my parents still call themselves Republicans or even Baptists. To align yourself with such a hate group, I mean, I'm not surprised, but I'm sure disappointed. Baptists were against abortion until it became legal, and then they changed their opinion about the whole thing. The awful truth is, if you wish death on any good, kind person, regardless of who they sleep with and what kind of family they have, you're an awful human being. You may be ignorant, or you may know better and still don't care. Only homophobes and just awful people who suffer from bigotry wishes death on any good person who pays their taxes and lives life quietly among themselves. I refuse to even be associated with any group that calls or dubbed anything the gay disease. Because I actually looked into what percentage of people in 2025 got AIDS. Half of them are cis heterosexual men, probably in relationships. The other half are people who don't call themselves heterosexual. It's 50-50. It's not the gay disease. It's a human disease. And hopefully, something that before I die in 40 years, something that can be curable. Something that we can celebrate that is no longer the smallpox of its time. I've heard that they've made leaps and bounds curing or making it much easier to find cures for specific incurable viruses and diseases. They've cured a few people of AIDS, but it's not mainstream and it's not available for common people out there in the world. I don't want to be a part of any group that refers to people having a gay disease, because it's dehumanizing. And we know that half the people who get AIDS every year are not gay. They're not bi, they're not trans, they're cis heterosexual people. And you're more likely to get a disease and suffer if you're the receiving partner during sex. So women are most likely to be targeted, or men who would call themselves the bottom, because people who receive during sex are the most likely to become infected. That's why having safe sex education is important. That's why we should reject abstinence-only sex ed. It doesn't work, which ironically was funded and approved by Ronald Reagan, the same president who ignored the AIDS crisis for almost 10 years. People deserve better. Minorities, people who are considered not heterosexual, deserve to be thought of as an unfortunate person who just happened to get a disease that we should be working toward curing. Getting AIDS should be met with the same sympathy, compassion, and caring as someone who gets COVID, shingles, Alzheimer's. I mean, the majority of people who get Alzheimer's are straight people, but nobody's ever called that a straight disease. People who hate gay people will call gay people slurs because that's something that they believe in, something they champion. But anyone who does not have compassion for minorities and targeted groups like gay people, trans, non-binary people, and you call them and continue the cycle of dehumanizing people by turning a blind eye to AIDS or being a part of groups that view gay people with contempt, you are a bigot. You can't get around that. That's why I refuse to be a Baptist. I refuse to be part of any denomination that views gay people as though they deserve to have a disease or be imprisoned. And it's not surprising to me that the biggest Protestant denomination, who also dubbed it the gay disease, also likes to touch the most kids in America. How and where you call targeted people slurs, you'll probably find a lot of domestic violence and crimes against children. Because when you don't care about one group of people, it's pretty safe to say you have a very low opinion of the other groups too. Luckily, presidents and people who came after Reagan, they made people take notice of it. And for the most part, 99% of people who get incurable STIs can live long lives, provided they get regular testing once or twice a year, and it doesn't become full-blown before they're diagnosed. But in some countries that have Christian roots and a lot of Christian evangelism, they may or may not have cheap access to STI testing. And I've never been in a church that ever made it important for anyone to get STI tests. Because, for the most part, people think that if you wait till marriage and have a cis heterosexual Christian marriage, you won't get a disease. And yet, millions upon millions of married women every year get infected by a cheating spouse or a cheating boyfriend. It doesn't matter what kind of life you have. Get tested. Even if you are married and happy, unless you're trying to get kids, wear protection and get tested. No matter how many years you live with someone, you may or may not know them as well as you think. And when the people who are called the group that's most likely to have the gay disease, if they know more about their health and get tested more than people who call them slurs, what does that tell us about our culture?